Let there be light. And there was light. Since as long as I can remember, I have been interested in the oddball devices. For me, a cool laptop is cool, but I prefer something really weird. In fact, that's why I own something like the Surface Pro 7, which is now pretty commonplace, but when it was first announced, the idea of a tablet with a magnetic keyboard and a kickstand and a touchscreen, all these things, it was actually a really strange device, and it was something that there really wasn't an equivalent to on the market. It was a really odd thing to do. Of course, there were iPads and things like that, but you get my point. Right about the time that the first Surface Pro came out in 2013, there was another device that was released by Asus called the Transformer, and this thing immediately caught my eye as someone who could not afford to buy a Surface Pro device at that time, but could maybe hope to buy something cheaper. That Asus Transformer was kind of what I had my eye on, and eventually I did buy one. And being kind of a little bit of a tech hoarder, I kept the thing, and I stumbled across it the other day, and I wanted to do something kind of weird with it for this video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically give an overview of this device. We're going to talk about this device from 2013 and talk about maybe even how it holds up today in 2020, and just kind of give a general overall feeling about this device, the Asus Transformer T100 TA. Before we go too far into this thing, it's really important to mention, why is this thing called a transformer? Well, the primary reason is because when you open this thing up, you will notice that there is a button in the middle here, and what that does is it allows the actual computer bit to come off in a tablet. Now, this thing did run Windows 8.1 when it first came out, although in preparation for this video, I did go ahead and fresh install a copy of Windows 10, because why not? And surprisingly, it does totally still work. Is it the fastest device I have in the house? No, of course it's not. This thing is running an Intel Atom processor, if you can remember those. It's the Atom Bay Trail Z3740. It's a quad-core processor, 1.33 gigahertz, boosting up to 1.86. The most unfortunate thing about it, perhaps, is the fact that it is a 32-bit processor, limiting pretty heavily what you can do on this thing. Check out the little snap-together function, though. Nice little click, and bada bing, bada boom, you've got yourself a laptop. Now, on the actual the keyboard side of things, you've got a teeny tiny little multi-touch trackpad. Believe it or not, this keyboard is actually not that bad, actually. It feels pretty good logging into things. I was pretty impressed with how it felt. This thing is relatively heavy. It is actually, you'd think this thing would be pretty light. It is not light at all. In fact, if you compare it to something like the Surface Pro 7, I'm quite sure this is considerably heavier than my Surface, even though it's considerably smaller. This is a 10.1 inch screen, so if you stack these two up, you've got quite a bit a smaller device, but it's thicker and it's heavier. But come on, this thing was, not nearly as expensive. But hey, you probably only paid about $399 for this thing when it was brand new, so you kind of get what you pay for there. Now, this thing does only have 2 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. 2 gigs of RAM on Windows 10 is absolutely terrible. 4 gig is the minimum spec, but hey, it's still running Windows 10 for me. It does have a micro SD slot. It charges over mini USB, and it charges incredibly slowly. And then it has mini HDMI, it has a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, and then a single USB-A, which is actually on the keyboard itself. Kind of calling back to the Windows 8.1 days, it actually has a volume rocker and then a Windows button on the side of the tablet in addition to the power button up top. So let's actually talk about this thing. How does it actually run today in 2020? Well, surprisingly, when you're just in, your Windows home screen, on your actual home screen here, really not that bad. It's actually pretty surprising. When you try to, do anything with it, like launch a web browser, it is brutally slow. You saw how long that took to launch. Let's go to YouTube and see how long that takes to load up a page on YouTube. We're still struggling along. All right, we've got this YouTube page loaded. Now let's try and open up a video on my gaming specific channel. Let's see how long this takes. Now this is using Microsoft Edge, which is my primary browser on everything. I don't remember it being quite this slow to begin with, but it was probably running Windows 8.1 instead of Windows 10, because this is absolutely unusable. All right, and somehow we have now begun playing the video. It took about 30 seconds for it to start playing. And once it starts playing, it's actually okay. Let's jump over to Twitter and see what kind of time it takes there. Once you get rolling and some things are cached, it's not totally unusable, although trying to play videos is definitely going to be a pain. But overall, I just think it's such a cool device. I mean, it connects to that keyboard with this little proprietary connector there, and then these two here actually are mechanical things to hold this to the keyboard. As a tablet itself, it was relatively thin. I mean, it was a pretty good little tablet. It does have, I believe it's like a 1.2 or 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera that looks pretty horrible. And of course, there's no way to use the keyboard without having this docked into it. But like I said earlier, the keyboard is actually much better than you would think it would be. Part of the reason I mentioned earlier that this thing is quite heavy, part of the reason it's very heavy is because this is where all the components are, making the tablet itself fairly heavy. And if the keyboard was too light, the thing would tip over very easily. And as you can see, it doesn't do that, and that's because they've weighted the base down. The base doesn't provide any additional battery. It does provide that additional USB-A port, so a little bit more in terms of I/O there, but no additional battery or performance like in something like a Surface Book. So all it is just additional weight to make sure that it doesn't tip over easily, but the end result is that you wind up with something that's probably twice as heavy as you expect it to be. So at the end of the day, for me, this is a device that, believe it or not, I used as like a daily computer for a good amount of time after I bought it. I think I got mine in 2014, and I think I got it on Woot, which is a one-day deal kind of website, so I probably paid quite a bit less than the $400. But I did use it as my primary device. This thing is 2.5 pounds, just to give you perspective, an actual number on that. The tablet itself is 1.2 pounds, so it literally does double up by having the keyboard in there. But it was a pretty cool little device for its time. I've done a lot with this thing, from installing, Android x86 builds on it to try to get that to work. Of course, with the keyboard, it's a little funky, getting the drivers to all work correctly. But I've kept this thing around because it has there's a soft spot in my heart for this device. This was one of the first devices that I bought with my own money that was frivolous, that I didn't need, that was silly and weird and different, and it made me happy. So I wanted to share this with you. I'd love to know if you guys out there in the YouTube comment world, if you guys have any weird devices like that maybe no one else really knows about or cared about or saw or used or reviewed really, but it held a special place in your heart. I'd love to know what that is, and I wish I had more of those devices. I wish I had kept all of them. Something like the Nokia N770 internet tablet comes to mind that I would love to have back in-house to do a video like this on, to show kind of what this thing was and how ahead of its time it was. Things like that. Let me know if there's something like that for you in the comments down below. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this, sort of a retro overview of a device that is at this point 7 years old, kind of how it holds up, what it looks like today. So guys, I'll see you on the next video, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends. If you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a Scary If Literal member. You'll get access to a whole bunch of emoticons to use with live streams and a shout out on an upcoming video. Thanks as always for your continued support.